There's this moment that can happen. It doesn't show up with a flash of lightning or some huge dramatic scene. It's much quieter. It's more like a window cracking open in a room that's been sealed shut for years. And when it does, something inside you just starts to realize that the life you've been living, it just doesn't quite fit anymore.
And man, this question, it just gets right to the heart of that feeling, doesn't it? You look around at the script you've been following and you realize, wait a second, someone else wrote this. And it feels like they wrote it for a completely different person. If that thought resonates with you at all, then this explainer is definitely for you. Okay, so let's be real. The phrase spiritual awakening can bring up some pretty wild, out there images. But what we're talking about here is something way more grounded, way more real. At its core, it's simply the process of becoming more honest with yourself. And once that starts, something really fascinating begins to happen. You just start letting things go.
So this is where it starts. It's that initial feeling, and the way our source material describes it is just perfect. It's like the shoes you're wearing are suddenly too tight, or the mask you've been holding up is just too heavy. It's this deep internal sense that the version of yourself you've been performing for everyone, well, it just isn't working anymore.
So what actually happens when that performance starts to crumble? Well, we're going to dive into 7 specific patterns and habits that people consistently say just fall away. And here's the crucial part. These aren't things you decide to quit through sheer willpower. Nope, they're things that quietly, slowly become impossible to keep doing. All right, first up, that constant hunger for approval. I mean, think about it. This is wired into us from day one, right? Approval is basically the currency of survival when we're kids. So we learn to read the room, to smooth our own edges, to put on a show. But as this awakening gets deeper, that whole machinery starts to sputter and fail. It's not really an act of rebellion, it's more like your system develops a genuine intolerance to the old performance. And this quote, wow, it just nails that physical feeling of constriction, right? Something you once wore so comfortably suddenly just doesn't fit. You can keep trying to squeeze into it, but it's not working. And eventually, you just have to take it off and set it down. That's exactly what it feels like to let go of that need for approval. Okay, this next one is so interesting because it's incredibly subtle. The need to feel special. See, what happens is the ego just finds a brand new costume. It puts on the spiritual person outfit. All of a sudden, a real, genuine inner experience gets turned into another external performance to make you seem exceptional. But here's the wild paradox. The moment you stop trying so hard to stand out, your actual self finally has room to emerge. And that person is infinitely more interesting than the curated version ever was. The third thing that starts to drop away is the performance of constant positivity. You know the one, it's that spiritual mask that says everything's amazing, even when it's really, really not. And as you can see here, there's a huge difference between performed peace, which is really just armor against feeling, and actual peace, which is what you find after you've sought with the hard stuff. The source tells this amazing story of a yoga teacher who just broke down in class one day. And you know what? That single moment of raw honesty built more trust with her students than years of performing perfect calm ever could have. And that leads us right into number 4, letting go of that tight, white-knuckled grip on certainty. We love to build our lives on things we know, but certainty, if you look at the left column, is closed off. It's stuck. As that dissolves, it gets replaced by what's on the right, wonder. And this isn't about being confused. It's about being able to live in the open, unresolved, curious, present moment. It's this beautiful shift from just collecting answers to actually expanding your ability to live inside the questions themselves. Number 5, blame as a way of life. Man, this can be one of the hardest to let go of because sometimes blame feels completely justified. But over time, it becomes a cage that keeps us powerless. The big shift here isn't about beating yourself up. It's a radical move to reclaim your own story, to start asking, okay, what role am I playing here? It's about taking yourself out of that helpless victim mode and stepping back into your own power. Okay, this next one is super tricky. It's called spiritual bypassing. Basically, it's using spiritual ideas to avoid the messy parts of being human. And this slide shows it perfectly. It's the difference between philosophizing about grief from a distance and actually letting yourself feel grief. Your mind might have all the right, enlightened-sounding answers, but your body is still keeping score. A real awakening demands that you show up for the whole thing, that you use these tools not as an exit ramp, but as a way to go deeper into life, messiness and all. And the final thing that falls away, it might be the quietest and most subtle of all, the identity of being the awakened one. It's so easy to mistake a feeling of being separate from everyone else as a sign of progress. But eventually you realize that this feeling of superiority, it's just another costume for fear. The real goal isn't to float above everyone else. It's to find your own messy, beautiful humanness in every single person you meet. So, hearing about these 7 things falling away sounds pretty great, right? But it's so important to understand that the process is almost never a straight line. It's often messy and honestly, kind of frustrating. So, let's take a look at the actual shape this kind of growth usually takes. We have this idea that progress looks like the image on the left, a steady, linear climb to the top. But our source suggests a much kinder, more realistic model, a spiral. You don't just conquer an old pattern and then poof, it's gone forever. Instead, you circle back, you revisit it. But each time you do, you're at a slightly higher elevation. You have a little more awareness. Slipping up isn't a failure. It's just part of the spiral path.
So here's a simple breakdown of how that spiral actually works in real life. First, you release an old pattern. You let it go. And then inevitably, you find yourself gripping it again. It happens. But here is the absolute key. This time, you're a little more aware while you're inside the pattern. And because of that awareness, the next time you let go, your grip is just a little bit looser. That's it. That's the real, tangible process of unwinding these things.
And this might be the most important, most freeing idea in this whole thing. Those old patterns, the approval seeking, the need for certainty, the blame, they were not mistakes. They were necessary survival tools. They were tools you needed for a past version of you, for a past stage of your life. They gave you something to stand on when the ground felt shaky. There's absolutely no need for shame here. So, after all of this shedding, all of this letting go of things that are no longer true, what's actually left? What happens when the performance finally truly stops? So I want you to just let this idea sink in for a second. With all this change, with all this release, it can absolutely feel like you're losing pieces of yourself. But listen to me, you are not losing yourself.
No, you are finding yourself. You are finally uncovering the person who was there all along, underneath all the layers of performance and striving. The version of you that emerges isn't smaller or less than. It's the most genuinely you version of you that has ever existed.
And that person, your actual self, they don't need to be special or perfectly positive or certain about everything. That person just needs to be here, fully alive in the only life you actually have. And what if that, in the end, is enough? What if just being fully here is everything?